Welcome to Prison Professors. One of the efforts that we always strive to make through our nonprofit is to help people who don't have really financial resources to bring a big team together. And what we try and do is bring the best minds, the people that can help individuals most. And that's why if you look some of the other interviews on our subject matter expert page, we're interviewing and providing guidance from people that have real depth and breadth of experience, including former chiefs of probation, former director of the Bureau of Prisons, former leader of halfway houses, and we're always bringing more. But today I am super enthusiastic to introduce to you an individual who has real depth and breadth of experience. He was a former district attorney for one of our major metropolitan areas, and he's so generous that he spends his time trying to help other justice-impacted people. And I reached out to him and asked if he would be willing to share some of his wisdom with people that visit our channel here. And so today I am very grateful to introduce you to Seth Williams, who has led a distinguished career as a civil servant for many decades, but he's also had some challenges, and we're going to learn about that today and what he's learned from the experience. So Seth, welcome to our program, and thank you on a personal level for taking time out of your busy day to spend time with us. Could you tell our audience a little bit about your background, about what led you to become a district attorney?
Well, certainly. I was the elected district attorney of the city of Philadelphia, a city of 1.6 million people. I had a staff of 600 prosecutors and investigators and support staff, where we prosecuted about 70,000 cases a year. I was the inspector general of the city of Philadelphia. I was a major of the United States Army, where I was the senior defense counsel for the Pennsylvania Army National Guard's 28th Infantry Division. I was a civil litigator, a criminal defense attorney, law professor, college professor, all of those things. And I was just very thankful to have those opportunities. But who I am, how did I become the DA? I was actually, Mike, I was given up for adoption at birth. And I lived in an orphanage. I lived in foster care. And then I was blessed and I was adopted by a wonderful couple, Rufus and Imelda Williams. And they sacrificed and gave me everything a child could ever want. I attended right out of high school, Philadelphia Central High School. I went to the United States Military Academy. But I tell people I got a medical discharge. They found out I was allergic to math and chemistry. So I then went to Penn State. I became the president of the Black Caucus, trying to fight and advocate for the civil rights of African-American students. I led a 102-mile march from Penn State to our state capital, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to get the school to divest from South Africa, to try to put financial pressure on the South African government to end the racist, atrocious process, governmental structure of apartheid. As a result of our march, then Governor Casey of Pennsylvania wrote a letter to the Board of Trustees demanding that they divest. So I learned at a very early age that a small group of people organized together can make a difference, right? Like Margaret Mead says. I then became the president of the entire undergraduate student government at Penn State for my senior year. So I represented all 57,000 undergraduate students. I went to Georgetown University Law Center, so Georgetown Law School, as a public interest law scholar. And I was exposed to all different types of public interest law career possibilities. I was in the criminal justice clinic at Georgetown, so I was representing indigent men that had been charged with crimes in the District of Columbia. And what I learned from that was that all of my clients needed help. They needed either some sort of addiction recovery help, they were homeless, they needed the assistance, and I, as their attorney, had to write a letter to the prosecutor trying to persuade the prosecutor to help this person get the help they needed so they wouldn't continue to commit crimes. And Mike, from that experience, I learned that it was the prosecutor in the courtroom that had all the power. And even the youngest, most junior of prosecutors that is in the charging unit that determines who's going to get charged with a crime. that they had more power than any public defender or F. Lee Bailey or Johnny Cochran. So I said, if I could go be an assistant district attorney in the city that I love, where I know the majority of crimes committed in the African-American community are committed by African-Americans against African-Americans. But the people in my neighborhood wanted justice. They wanted people to stop robbing them, but they wanted to be treated fairly if they were charged, right? So I wanted to do that. And after I graduated from Georgetown in 1992, I became an assistant district attorney in the city of Philadelphia in September of 1992. And I spent 10 and a half years as a prosecutor. The first year in the municipal court unit, prosecuting felonies, the preliminary hearings for felonies, people shooting people, burglars, drug dealers, car thieves, all those types of cases, and misdemeanor trials, DUIs, but I was had a caseload about 50 cases a day when I was doing preliminary hearings, as crazy as that might sound, and 25 trials a day when I was doing misdemeanor trials for a year. After that year, I was assigned to the juvenile court unit, where I prosecuted juveniles, people under the age of 18, that were alleged to have committed crimes. Out of that period, for 6 months, I prosecuted adults that committed crimes against children. And Mike, it really break your heart. I'm sure you know that the majority of crimes committed by adults against children are sex crimes. And 90% of those sex crimes are committed by people that the family knows. Dad, mom's boyfriend, an uncle, a person the family has entrusted the child to, a teacher, a camp director, right, a coach. And it broke my heart because every day I was in court fighting for this child that had been sexually assaulted by a member of the family generally, and the family knew. But they were mad at me and the child for bringing this and making this a bigger issue than it needed to be. And I have to tell you, that really affected me, and it really started me down a path that was not helpful or healthy for me. In that for me to deal with the trauma that I was dealing with every day with these kids that were sexually assaulted, I began to consult a little too much with a guy named Jack Daniels, or martinis of different types. After doing that for a year, I was in the felony waiver unit for 2 years, where I prosecuted adults that were waiving their right to a trial, but they were charged with felonies, possessing guns illegally, burglaries, low-level drug cases, bar fights, cases like that, where I had about 12 cases a day on my list. Then I was in the major trials unit for 2 years, where I prosecuted the most complex felonies, bank robberies, carjackings, aggravated assaults, kidnappings. I did that for 2 years. I had the first 3 cases in Pennsylvania where we had the 3 strikes and you're out. So I had a lot of trial experience, a lot of juries, about 37 juries in the span of 2 years, on top of, more waiver trials every day in that unit. I was asked then to become the assistant chief of the municipal court unit. So I then supervised the youngest prosecutors for 2 years. I did that for 2 years. And then I was asked to create a unit called the Repeat Offenders Unit. I became the chief of that unit to deal with the phenomenon that in Philadelphia, about 5% of the criminals commit 60% of the crimes. So the theory is if we can use evidence-based practices, and I created a geographic vertical prosecution strategy based on community for the DAs to handle the cases from start to finish, and then to be able to do all that we could through all the means necessary to stop the repeat offenders from continuing to become further recidivists. So then I left the office. I went into civil practice. I sued nursing homes that we thought abused the elderly. I defended people that were charged with crimes. I ran for DA in 2005. I lost to my predecessor, my former boss, Lynn Abraham. In November of that year, I was appointed by Mayor Street to be the Inspector General of Philadelphia to investigate all allegations of corruption, fraud, waste, and mismanagement in the entire city government and businesses that had contracts with the city. After that, I worked at a large law firm in Philadelphia called Stradley Ronan, where I conducted internal investigations for Fortune 500 companies. In 2009, I ran again for district attorney. In a 5-person race, I won the primary. I won the general election with 75% of the vote. And then on January the 4th of 2010, I was sworn in as the 24th district attorney in the history of Philadelphia and the first African-American district attorney in the history of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And it was an honor for me to serve. I tried to restructure the criminal justice system in Philadelphia to make it more fair. But also we were very successful in reducing homicides and gun violence. And I'm very thankful for that. So that gives you a little bit of the pathway that I took to become the district attorney. And along the way, I told you I joined the Army. After having failed at West Point, I got a direct commission. I became a first lieutenant in the JAG Corps. Ultimately, after 19 years, I left as a result of my conviction that we'll talk about. But I was a major in the Army. I prosecuted, I defended people. So I have a breadth and depth of experience, I think, as an assistant DA, inspector general, elected district attorney, criminal defense attorney, Army lawyer, Army prosecutor, Army defense attorney. Then I became a federal target, a federal defendant. I was on trial. And then ultimately I became a federal inmate. And now as a returning citizen, I think I almost have a singularly unique perspective on the American criminal justice system.
You certainly do. And anybody that's going in should be really absorbing this. If an individual with your experience could come into the system, they should be understanding, well, how easy is it for somebody without your experience to come into the system? I mean, in this era of mass incarceration, a lot of times we look, well, this is, of course, my view. We look at behavior that could be responded, that the government could respond to civilly, but instead they bring a criminal case.
Right.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. But individuals who are going into the system would really be wise to not only have exceptional counsel, but also to listen and learn from people who have experience like you've just described. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the worries or concerns that you had going into the criminal justice system as a defendant rather than as a prosecutor?
Yeah, and Mike, I can't emphasize enough exactly what you said. And specifically, more specifically, of course, I believe, for what we refer to as white-collar criminals. But despite the fact that I was an attorney for 25 years, a defense attorney, a prosecutor, when I first learned that I was a federal target, my whole life turned upside down, and I didn't know who to seek guidance from. I didn't know who to talk to. Most people tell you not to talk to anybody because you don't know who the feds are going to use as a witness against you. And unlike many people who are involved with criminal behavior, okay, we'll say an example, a person who is selling drugs on a corner, whatever their reasons are, they know other people that are doing that same thing. They know people that have gone to prison. They've maybe spoken to people that have gone to prison. They might also know people that are working with them in unison to sell drugs or to break the laws they're doing, whatever their crime is. And they have some sense of security that if something were to happen to them, that their colleagues, their co-conspirators, the guys in their crew are going to take care of their family while they're away if something were to happen. Well, most white-collar criminals, this CPA or that dentist or this accountant or a doctor or this lawyer, for the most part, they don't have that same shared experience. They don't have that intent. And as you just said, many people can do things that they don't even think they have criminal intent. But unlike state law, in the federal courts, you don't need to show criminal intent. You need to show not mens rea, that the person, intended to do it, just that actus reus, that they did it. So there are about 10,000 civil laws that also have a criminal penalty. So there's a wonderful book called 3 Felonies a Day. Then almost any American could be charged with 3 felonies a day by the federal government if they wanted to make you an example somehow. So I found myself under federal investigation. I found myself worried every day. What's going to happen to my daughters? Why are they investigating me? What do they think I did? What's going to happen to me if they do something to me? What's prison really like? Now, I visited prisons as a defense attorney, as a law student, as a prosecutor. I knew I hated it there, but what's it really like? And most people, like me, only think of Shawshank Redemption or Cool Hand Luke, just crazy movies, right? Chained Heat, things that we see in Hollywood. So I lost a lot of sleep. I began to drink much more excessively than ever before in my life. But the questions that kept me up at night, Mike, that I asked my attorneys about were things they really didn't even know the answers to. I only really learned what I wish I had known while I was under investigation, while I was on trial, before, and what people similarly situated need to know before they get sentenced. I only learned those things when I was in prison from inmates telling me, oh, this is RDAP. This is what classification is. This is what designation is. Your family can come visit you. Your family can put money on the books. This is what your family should know before they come to visit. All of these things that I was so worried about. And that I thought I was unique, Mike. But there are a lot of people. I participate in a support group now. I learn from these other people that other people share my experience. And I can learn from them. And that's something I wish I had. And I think now, as a former prosecutor, defense attorney, person that was federally sentenced for 60 months, was able to reduce that to 34 months. I think that I have an experience and empathy and compassion to want to help people not to have to go through what I went through.
You could also help people just by your testimony today. I think could give people hope that says even though they've gone through it, even though they've faced the gauntlet, you're somebody who's faced the gauntlet and really had a significant comeuppance, being once revered in the law enforcement to being vilified in law enforcement, having to deal with it. But we can see you now, and we'll talk a little bit about what you've been doing since you've come home. But there is hope on the other side of the journey. That just hope doesn't, I don't think it materializes by accident. It happens by pursuing a deliberate path and really preparing. And the earlier somebody prepares, the better off they can become. Could you tell us a little bit about your adjustment inside of a prison, how that went for you?
Well, first, I wasn't prepared. I was on trial. I was fighting the charges against me. I had been charged with 29 separate federal felonies, to include driving my city vehicle for personal use. That was like 5 different things, as wire fraud, because my secretary emailed my security detail my schedule for things that the feds thought weren't public or weren't official. So a myriad of things. Now, I have to admit, Mike, I fully accept responsibility. Now, I should have reported all of the gifts I ever received. Some gifts that I received, I should not have accepted because they had the mere appearance of impropriety. I had settled with the city's ethics board to pay a fine of $64,000 for those. But the feds still came at me, even after I said that I was going to not run for re-election. I was trying to do all the things that I thought they had told my attorneys I needed to do for me not to be prosecuted. But ultimately, Mike, I went on trial. We were on trial for almost 2 full weeks. We had very good first, 10 days, and then we had a bad day. And my attorneys were offered a plea for me to accept a guilty plea to 1 count. And I still didn't want to do that. But my attorneys were like, look, Seth, do you want to come home when your daughter, who is now, she's 11, do you want to come home? Your daughters are home in high school and one is in college, or do you want to come home when they're both old and have their own children and you have like great grandchildren? So I took the offer, pled guilty to one thing. I'd been told, Mike, that I'd be able to remain on bail to get my affairs in order, take my daughters to therapy to get their heads right, sell my house, box up things, for that 4 or 5 months prior to sentencing. I went to court. I entered the plea. Unbeknownst and surprisingly to me, the judge revoked my bail that moment. I was handcuffed in court. I was walked underground, strip searched, given an orange jumpsuit, orange boxers, orange socks, orange t-shirt, and some little blue Skipper sneakers. And I was escorted to my own single solitary confinement cell where I remained for 152 days, 5 months. So I had no preparation. Really, Mike, the only preparation I had was that I had been in the Army and what it was like on our day, reception day at West Point, and just a lot of other experiences in the Army. Otherwise, I would not have had any way to prepare for what I was going through. But I lost my job. I lost my reputation. I lost my house. I lost my law license. I lost my liberty. I lost my pensions. I lost everything. But it was a tremendous spiritual journey. And this is the content maybe for another show. But it was when I lost everything. When I learned that God was all I had, I knew that God was all I needed. And that's what got me through and has made me a much better person, I think, than I was on June the 29th, 2017, when I was incarcerated. But it was in a very difficult transition. Being in solitary, as you can imagine, the United Nations, Amnesty International, the Obama Justice Department all believe that solitary confinement of more than 10 days is deleterious to the human brain. It causes PTSD of all forms. So I do know what I would tell other people who are under investigation, who are under indictment, who are on trial, who are awaiting sentencing. I have lots of things that I would help that person, would try to advise those individuals as to how to prepare themselves. Equally important, how to prepare their families for everything they're going through. Because for many people, right, their wives, maybe when they go to the synagogue or they go to the country club, when their husband's under indictment or their spouse is under indictment, no one wants to talk to them. No one wants to sit near them, right? My friends, it wasn't like a Goodfellas movie where everybody, hey, buddy, you're going to be okay. No, people gave me the Heisman, right? They don't want to talk to me. People who I thought were great friends, who I got them jobs or wrote letters for their kids to get into college, ghosted me, never wrote me. People that had promised me, again, no one owes me anything. I don't want to seem like I'm entitled, right? But people that had told me they were going to look out for my daughters while I was gone didn't.
So you did you got 5 months in solitary. What was your ultimate sentence, and how much did you serve in prison after the sentencing?
The judge had promised my attorneys that whatever the jury gave me, he was going to give me 5 years for every conviction. And so I pled to one count. So he gave me every minute of 60 months, a 5-year sentence.
And you did that where?
I spent the first 5 months at the Federal Detention Center in Philadelphia. After I was sentenced, then you have to wait classification and designation. Classification, as you know, is they're going to look into my background, my educational background, work history, any problems that I have, and they're going to do, that's classification. Designation, they figure out, well, what is the right facility for this person of this classification. So they designated me to go to the Federal Correctional Institution in Morgantown, West Virginia, which would have been maybe a 5-hour car ride from Philadelphia. At some point on November the 28th, they took me out of my cell. They took me downstairs. I was given a different outfit. I was handcuffed. I had a belly chain and leg irons, and I was put on a U.S. Marshals bus to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where there were other buses that said they were going to West Virginia. But no, Mike, they took me off the bus, they put me on an airplane. The tarmac was surrounded by marshals with shotguns and M16s. They put me on a plane known as Con Air, just like the movie. When I saw that movie with Nicolas Cage, I thought this was just make-believe. No, that's real. And I was on that plane, handcuffed, belly chain, leg irons. And I flew from Harrisburg for 4 hours to Oklahoma City. And through this entire experience, being in solitary, under investigation, I never had any thoughts of suicide. Never. But when I was on that plane, handcuffed, belly chain, leg irons, for the first time in my life, Mike, I felt to myself, you know what? If this plane crashes, it'll be all right with me. That's how I really felt. And it was terrible. It was the worst I ever felt in my life, that moment on that plane, with people that had committed every type of crime. I then lived in Oklahoma City's Federal Transportation Center for 8 days, which was a bizarre experience, completely segregated by race. They have a TV room with just white males, skinheads, watching Fox News and country music TV all day. A TV room with African-American men watching BET and ESPN all day. A room with Hispanics watching Univision all day. And a room that's kind of like a hodgepodge, the misfits of all those groups watching sci-fi all day. When you ate, blacks only ate at tables with blacks, whites only at tables with whites, Hispanics at tables only with whites, or with Hispanics. My first day, I bumped into a Jewish guy named Seth. You know, my name is Rufus Seth Williams. Everybody knows me as Seth. So I just hit it off with this Jewish guy named Seth. At lunch, we just sat down and we were talking. A black guy at the same time came put his hand on my shoulder. A white guy put his hand on Seth's shoulder and said, no, we don't mix here. Blacks eat here, whites eat there. And they brought us to the separate rooms, separate areas. So there was all a crazy learning experience for me. But then I went to Morgantown, and I was at a camp. There's no wall around it. I was originally placed in the unit, Bates unit, because I'm a veteran. I was put in the veterans unit, where they have a dog training program. Of the camps that I could have gone to, it had all the things that I wanted. It had a great chapel, a music program. I taught myself how to play the saxophone. I had my first public performance on Easter Sunday, playing Amazing Grace as the recessional hymn. I taught Bible study. I went to Bible study classes. I taught GED. There was a dog program. There was an outdoor weight pit. But it was only from other inmates I had learned about RDAP, the Residential Drug Abuse Program. During my pre-sentence investigation, I would not have told the investigator that I was abusing alcohol, especially while I was under investigation. But being honest actually helped me to being accepted and evaluated for the Residential Drug Abuse Program, which ultimately I was in, which took 12 months off of my sentence. I also had good conduct the entire time I was there. Not one demerit for not making my bed, for being out of bounds, for going somewhere I wasn't. No shots for me. So I got another 9 months off of my sentence. And I got 6 months for home confinement at the very end. So I went from a 60-month sentence to actually serving 34 months. And that's something that a lot of people need to understand, what they can do proactively to mitigate what could possibly happen to them as a result of a sentence they already got. So you can do things to mitigate your sentence before the judge renders her or his sentence. And there are things that you can do after that also that can get you home sooner to your friends, family, and loved ones.
And it's incumbent for everybody to learn about those different mitigation strategies.
Correct.
Because their lawyers may not know. Tell us about your experience when you came back to society. You've been home now for how long?
I've been home since April the 23rd of 2020. And so a little more than 2 years.
Yeah, tell us about you've built a real pathway to contribution again, And I think our audience will find some hope and inspiration on life after the journey through prison.
Yeah, so I really began seeing my life while I was in prison in a different way. And that they put me in solitary because they thought inmates were going to want to hurt me. They might want to kill me. The truth is, Mike, that the inmates would have fought people that wanted to hurt me because I was helping them learn how to read. I was helping them write letters to their families, their lawyers. Ultimately, I was in the suicide prevention cadre. I learned how to help people that were suicidal. And to know they really don't want your solution. They really just want your presence, just to be there with them. I taught GED. 19 of my students, as I told you, earned their GED. I really saw myself that God had me where he wanted me to be. And my motto has become the lesson from Joseph in the story of Genesis. What others intended for my harm, God has used for good, the saving of many lives. So while I was in prison, I was preparing every day to come home, both physically, spiritually, psychologically, how to be a better father, how to recognize the triggers for the behaviors that allowed me to numb myself either with alcohol or pursuing women other than my significant other, right? Things that hurt people. I had to learn how to handle those things in a healthy way. And so I had a whole sphere of, like spokes on a wheel. All those had to be balanced. Financial literacy, psychological, spiritual health, relationships. So I was preparing to come home, trying to get jobs even while I was in prison, writing letters to people. And most people not even responded. I came home. I was living originally in the attic of my ex-wife's house. I'm fortunate that she let me stay there. My daughters were downstairs. After 8 days, they wanted me to get a job. Ultimately, I got a job working at a large box home improvement store. I don't even want to give their name for promotion for them because I hated it. I worked there from 7 p.m. to 5:30 every morning, unloading trucks, stocking shelves, using a handheld device to complete online orders. It was just grueling. But again, God had me, I think, where he wanted me, because that was the summer that George Floyd was murdered. The majority of the men that worked with me were angry. And I, in some ways, was pastoral in trying to help them deal with their emotions, help them with their resumes, help them try to get other jobs. But I was always trying to continue to network with my old friends, governors, congressmen, senators, attorney generals, district attorneys, prosecutors, captains of industry. Some were helpful, but I was trying to lay those foundations, just putting the seeds out there. But I had to do what I needed to do to rebuild. I began working, advocating for returning citizens to register to vote, helping them do that. I got a job from a friend at a wedding chapel. I began officiating weddings. But I continued to try to apply for jobs almost every day online, through LinkedIn, through Indeed. Rejection, 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 rejection. And I had to try to support myself, project myself as a good father still, despite struggling financially. My church supported me, so they opened their arms to me. I'm very fortunate for that. Continued working. I knew that I wanted to continue doing what I did, Mike, in prison. I knew that the recidivism rate is so high because what I learned in teaching GED was the majority of my students never had problems getting jobs. They had problems keeping jobs. They didn't have the skills, the wraparound skills, conflict resolution, conflict prevention, addiction abatement stuff, financial literacy. How do you not just get a job? How do you remain in the workforce? How do you thrive? And most of the guys that I taught were like, the guys in my crew home, they won't be mad at me if I get an HVAC certification, if I become a welder, if I become a commercial driver and become a truck driver because I can become an entrepreneur. And my friends will respect that. So I put that in the back of my head. Ultimately, I got a job with a Baltimore-based nonprofit, and I was a director of a vocational training center that taught culinary arts and people to become HVAC technicians. But more importantly, 80% of the skills every day, if you work at a widget factory, have nothing to do with making widgets. 80% have to do with how do you get along with your coworkers? How do you respond when your boss says something inappropriate? How do you deal with colleagues, customers? Do you show up on time, right? The greatest ability is availability. Be there. And so 80% of what we taught was those power skills, I call them. And how returning citizens need to be able to talk with each other about all of the anxieties, the stresses that many of us can't talk to other people about, or don't know how to talk to other people about, or people that have no understanding of what it is we're talking about. How your families are treating you differently. How people talk to you almost like you don't even know the language. They just talk to you like you're like just an ignorant person. Or they just treat you completely with disrespect because they think it's okay. And a lot of people, before we went away, had big egos, and having to deal with this humility is something that people need to talk about and need to understand and might need help with, right? But I'm just blessed now. You know, I work here at this law firm. I try to help people that are going through what I went through. I'm here at the Igwe firm. I help people that are, we're trying to help with wrongful convictions, help people that have issues while they're on probation or parole, dealing with various issues to negotiate and to navigate being on supervised release. But also very importantly, I was recently hired, created an opportunity. I was hired by a nonprofit that's going to fund, and a large Baptist church is going to house a new vocational training center. So we're going to be teaching individuals to become commercial drivers or to get a nationally recognized portable certification by the Environmental Protection Agency to become an HVAC technician. So these are entry-level jobs that will allow people, regardless of their convictions, regardless of their educational attainment and achievement in the past, to enter the workforce and get good jobs, Mike, with real, people need, no matter where you are, no matter what the economy is, people need heat, people need air conditioning, people need ventilation systems and clean air, especially after COVID. And now everybody needs a truck driver to deliver either Amazon or you name the company. So there are real jobs with real benefits, with real career aspirations and potential attainment. But also for people, many folks I learned that were in prison with me were tremendous businessmen, had all types of business savvy and entrepreneurial pursuits. These are ways that we're going to help them have legal ways to do that, and maybe become their own boss, run their own company in the future. And so I'm very proud to be doing all of those things while also trying to do as much as I can, both in that capacity and the capacity here and working with you to help people that have gone through what we've gone through or possibly going through what we went through so that they can minimize and mitigate their own personal loss and grief.
Well, Seth, you have a lot to be proud of, not only the work that you did as a civil servant, but also in the way that you responded to a difficult, challenging situation that derails a lot of people's prospects for success, and you've only been home for a couple of years and have built a life of meaning and relevance and dignity. And what I always encourage people to do, you could learn anything you want by watching interviews with people like Seth, but sometimes people need a little bit more. They may need a challenge. They may need help than just watching something on a video. They may need help in navigating the complexity of a civil forfeiture case, or they may want to know how to navigate a criminal investigation when they find themselves targeted, or they may want somebody just to talk with them so that they can communicate more effectively with their defense attorneys. And you're certainly a great resource of somebody that could provide that insight. And that's why I wanted you on our page as a subject matter expert, that people could watch your video, listen to you, hopefully develop a sense of camaraderie with you, and if they want to reach out, certainly we want to provide them the ability to do that, because that's what our nonprofit is about, is helping people learn how to help themselves. But sometimes they need a real guide, and I can't think of a better guide than you. So I really want to thank you for being a part of our community. And if you have anything that I shouldn't have asked, that I should have asked, that I didn't ask, let us know.
What you're saying is 100% right. I'm only able to do this now because I'm trying to be authentic. Some people think when they come out, oh, I'll go be this other person now. No, I'm embracing that I was a defense attorney, that I was an Army officer, that I was the prosecutor, that I did get prosecuted. And this is my experience. And from this is what I've learned. And now I get paid to write for online service, my experience. And I talk about how I think we can reduce gun violence, but we have to take into consideration the people that are shooters and what I've learned from those guys in prison. And so it's unbelievable now. I get stopped by police officers every day who wish I was still the DA. And I think I'd be a much better attorney and a much better district attorney now as a result of my experience. I hope to get my law license back this year, and that'll help me in many other ways. But I really believe that this experience is really beneficial only by me being authentic to your listeners and to the people that reach out to your nonprofit.
Well, we really appreciate you for taking time out of your busy day to share your story. I think it's a story of hope. It's a story of redemption. It's a story that I hope other people will learn from and realize that although they may be in a challenging time right now, it's never too early and it's never too late to start sowing seeds for a better outcome. So thank you very much, Seth, for being a part of our community. And I will make sure that people know how to get in touch with you in the event that they want to get your guidance on more personal matters.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Mike.
Thank you.
All right. And tell your wife I said hi.
I will. Bye-bye.
All right.